Hi, this is Teresa Martin from Lower Cape TV, and welcome to Legislative Update. With me today is State Senator Julian and State Representative Sarah Peake. Welcome.
Thank you,
Happy
Teresa.
August.
I know, August. I know, since it's August, we actually have come out of the July process, and we now have a state budget. Yay! And we have a legislative session that has concluded. So I just want to jump in with, I know there's a list of things that have happened. What are some of the highlights?
Great. So yes, we do have a budget, a balanced budget, and in the last months of the fiscal year, or really throughout about the last 6 months, we ran a surplus over projections, so we've been able to sock more money away into the rainy day fund, which is important to have because we certainly saw through the economic turn down of 2008 through about 2010 or 11 or 12, we had to tap into those rainy day funds because it was raining out, so that's good. So the session is over. We have a long and impressive list of accomplishments.
Let's look at some of those.
That we have gotten done. Julian and I wrote them down because we didn't want to miss anything. We've taken major steps, and Massachusetts, again, leads the nation in terms of gun safety, in terms of addressing the opioid crisis, animal welfare. I happen to sit on that conference committee, criminal justice reform, the so-called grand bargain, which guarantees workers a living wage of up to $15 an hour and paid family medical leave. We've addressed women's rights, repealing archaic laws that banned abortion. We're still on our books, believe it or not.
Really?
As well as the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act we did. Julian, you want to take the rest of this list? There we go. We'll just pass it on. This is how we work together as a team.
I think in the the flurry of the end of the legislative session, right? There's a lot that's happening, but a lot of big accomplishments. I think folks remember back to the Equifax data breach. A lot of concerns around your and my personal information privacy. We passed a law, and it's on the books now in Massachusetts, around requiring disclosure when this happens, and that consumers don't have to pay to actually get their data shored up. Major accomplishment that the Cape and Islands Legislative Delegation led for many years. The number one priority for municipal police has languished on Beacon Hill, and that was to develop a stable funding stream for municipal police training. We got that done. The Senate passed it. The House passed it. The governor signed that. So now we're going to have $10 million a year for municipal police training. And then bond bills, which we talked a lot about.
Yes.
Some pretty big pieces on an economic development bond bill and an environmental bond bill. Millions of dollars that'll come back to the region. Some work on Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station, automatic voter registration, some public health priorities as well. The age to use tobacco in Massachusetts will now be 21, consistent with alcohol, so that's a real important public health piece. And then a real commitment to continue Massachusetts being first in the nation for veterans benefits. Took up some omnibus legislation that actually we got a few little things in there. Working with local veterans to make sure that we're staying ahead of the curve there. So lots of accomplishments. I mean, we can go into each of them. I don't know how much time we have. But.
And the informal sessions still continue to roll along. So, for example, we have a number of home rule bills that have come up from our communities. There's a bill from the county regarding an early retirement incentive. All of those are still very much alive and will hopefully, touch wood, happen and pass with our goading and pushing and advocating and all of that in informal sessions coming up.
Informal sessions are a little bit different, though, right? Because I understand everything has to be done unanimously.
Yeah, so what it means is that any one member can object.
Right.
So
and put a hold on a bill or doubt the presence of a quorum. And once you do that, then suddenly everything grinds to a halt.
Yeah.
But we're able to keep the regular day-to-day business. Particularly in Massachusetts, we have 351 cities and towns, that need a lot of things to go through the legislature. So we're still doing that work. Right. But anything that's remotely controversial cannot pass until we reconvene in January.
For example, we're poised and ready to file a bill that will enable the three towns of Harwich, Dennis, and Yarmouth to enter into a joint agreement with each other regarding treatment of their sewage and a joint sewage treatment plant and all of that. And that's just come out of House Counsel's office. We've sent it, Tim Whalen has taken the lead on this. We've sent it back to the local communities, and once we get the sign off from their various wastewater committees that it does what it needs to be done, that bill will be filed, and I'm hopeful that we'll get that enacted before the 2nd of January.
I'm just kind of a silly question. Why does the state legislature need to be involved in an agreement between 3 towns?
Right, that is a very good question, because Massachusetts is what's called a home rule state. So dating back almost to the time of John Adams when the Constitution was written, there is much that is done on the municipal level that needs the seal of approval from the legislature. And it's interesting, intermunicipal agreements for shorter periods of time or for less money during a municipal reform act of several sessions ago, we enacted that allows communities to agree about certain things. Like let's say Eastham and Wellfleet wanted to share a building inspector. That kind of stuff can happen without the nod from the legislature, but a project of this magnitude does that contract in effect among those 3 communities, because it involves the taxing of the citizens in those communities to support this. That does have to come to the legislature for approval.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't realize that, and I bet a lot of people weren't aware of that.
Right.
Can I ask you about a couple of things that you mentioned at the list? I don't think we've talked
Absolutely.
about, but I'm
Yes.
curious to know more about. One is, you mentioned animal welfare.
Yes.
What's that? I don't think we've talked about that.
Right, so I got thrown into this conference committee. The lead sponsor of the bill, Lou Kafka, was unavailable in the last days of the session to be there, so I got a call on the Friday before we're supposed to adjourn on Tuesday saying, hey Sarah, can you chair this conference committee? So we ultimately came up with a bill, and what it does, it's actually part 2 of an earlier animal welfare bill that we did. A couple of things that it does. Importantly, we have learned from public safety people and realtors, interestingly enough, that people abandoning pets in apartments or in apartments that they've been evicted from or homes that have been foreclosed upon has been a real problem. So this creates a mandate that either the homeowner or the person in charge, I believe it's within 48 hours, go in and inspect that premises to see if there's been an animal left there. The stories we heard from particularly the people in the real estate community about going into some of these homes and apartments and finding like a dead dog, like laying in the bathroom, looking for the last drops of water. I mean, it was just like so heart-wrenching. And this seems like a simple fix to a problem that unfortunately is very widespread. There's also some pieces in there around wildlife management. We've tasked the Department of Fish and Game to come up with a best practices proposal for the management of wildlife that would allow for the taking of wildlife, relocation of them, and hopefully diminishing the need to kill and an outright ban on drowning of either domestic or wild animals. And we also have a piece in there that brings more accountability, higher penalties and fines when there's a hit and run accident involving an animal, greater liability for the person that leaves the scene. And lastly, we ask insurance companies to compile data for us on dog bites, because there's right now people that own certain breeds either pay higher premiums or in some cases can't obtain homeowners insurance at all. So we're asking the insurance companies to, over a 3-year period, to collect that data, file it with the Department of Insurance, as well as with the House clerk and the Senate clerk, for us to really take a look at and see if there's a rational basis to charge these differing rates. Because so often the animals that are in shelters now are a pit bull mix or a German Shepherd or a Rottweiler or some of these other breeds. And there's kind of an anecdotal belief among some of us that maybe those breeds really aren't more prone to bite than...
They just have bad PR, or people have seen
That's
something
exactly
that terrifies them.
So there's an effort to get the data on this.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Well, the other one I want to ask about, again, we have just about 5 minutes left, so I just want to kind of give us a sense of timing, is the police training funding,
Yeah.
which is something I think people don't even understand the dynamics of. When you said that, I was actually surprised, thinking, well, surely we always fund police training.
So police
Julian
training
was a real leader
traditionally,
in this.
thank you, has been, traditionally police training has been through municipalities, right, that have taken
Right.
care of it. It's part of your budgets. And many years ago, over a decade ago, now going on 2, firefighters were able to secure support from the state. There's a surcharge on homeowners insurance, a very small percentage, that funds municipal fire training. And this has really been helpful, particularly in keeping up with the whole evolving nature of work related to not only firefighting but first response. And we didn't have something similar for municipal police officers. And so, given tight budgets, particularly during a downturn, men and women in blue were not getting the training they needed for a whole host of things. Everything from CPR to active shooter situations to school resource officers, implicit bias training, which is something that really is on folks' minds increasingly. And so the state had begun to appropriate sums of money in drabs and dribbles depending on the budget, but there was no stable stream to sort of have a equivalent secure pot of money like firefighters do. So what we did, and the police association, officers association, the state came up with this idea to have a $2 surcharge on rental cars. So you rent a car for a day, you rent a car for a month, it's $2. That then goes into a fund that provides up to $10 million in municipal police training. So this is going to mean, for every municipality, it's going to eliminate their costs, right? The municipal cost for the training of new police recruits, and it's going to mean that we're really able to give police officers tools they need. Increasingly, policing and first response is a lot more complicated than it even used to be.
Yeah,
It's not just traditional bread and butter law enforcement. Those, certainly out here this time of year, we really rely on folks for traffic and all that. But they're on the front lines of the opiate epidemic. Increasingly they're asked to be social workers. And so if we don't give police officers and men and women in blue really the tools they need to sort of meet these challenges, we're just asking too much. And so that's what this dedicated funding stream for municipal police training provides.
And $2, a one-time charge, no matter how many days you rent a car for, was it $10 million a year?
It'll add up to
estimate.
that.
It'll add up to that. Interesting little ironic twist. I was talking with a colleague of mine who represents a part of the city of Brockton, and she said she supported it not only to provide the training, but because there's a great nexus there. She said she's learned from her law enforcement people that often drug dealers don't own their own car anymore, but they rent a car. So this way, it's harder to say, oh yeah, so-and-so is driving that red Ford, because maybe one day it's a red Ford and another day it's a green Mazda or something like that. So she said, so it's kind of nice to think that they're being surcharged to pay for better training so that the cops can arrest them.
I love that.
There's a nice little full circle that comes there. Yeah.
We have just about a minute left, and we have another session on the horizon. What are some of the things that we're going to be looking out for?
So I think first, right, when you get all these things done, we pass the laws or the authorizations or we appropriate the money that has to be implemented. So what our offices do is really make sure that those monies are dispersed, that they're reaching, that the intent of the law is meant. And so that's a really important piece. The legislative session will start in January, and then shortly thereafter we'll convene and begin filing bills. Right. So in my office, we're taking a look at, all right, what did we file? I think we ended up filing 56 or 58 bills by the end of the session. What are things that we're going to need to file again? Right? What are things if we've gotten it done? Check. What are things that we'll need to file again? What are things we don't need to file again? One example of that, Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station has been something that has been really concerning. Right. We've been working on for quite a while. We were able to appropriate $100,000 for a working group within the administration to hold Entergy, to hold the utility accountable. We also got the Attorney General on there. Given that Pilgrim's closing, the need for filing legislation that we filed in the past, that's a question. Right. Pesticides is another issue that folks in the Lower Cape really care about. We filed different bills on this, but we haven't gotten much traction. So what you try to do is really look at and say, all right, is there another way to get at the issue we're trying to solve here? And so you spend some time. I know my staff and Sarah's staff. We're only as good as our staff.
That's right.
Are spending time thinking about this.
And we'll work collaboratively together. Driving up here together, Julian and I were talking about. We didn't get the comprehensive housing bill across the goal line, but we were already brainstorming about what little fixes might be appropriate for the Lower and Outer Cape that might not be in a statewide bill. Some of that might be zoning tweaks, others might be, and I've had a meeting with the people from DHCD in the governor's office already about a commitment for various grant funding for our smaller communities, so that, for example, the criteria doesn't say if you create 50 or more units, because we're not going to create 50 units in one fell swoop in Eastham, for example. But to make sure that we get our fair share of the pot of monies that's available through these various bond bills that we enacted. So there's a lot of stuff that we'll be working on in the interim and then going into next session, aside from the bill filing process as well.
It seems like, just to sort of summarize, this period of time is, from between now and the first of the year, is really much needed time to digest this list of all these things that have happened
Correct.
and make sense of it,
Right.
and then figure out, so you go into the next session prepared and
Yeah.
ready to actually work.
And it's our opportunity to go to the voters, to talk to them about what we've done, and to ask them to send us back to do that work in January. So it also gives us that time. With so much going on at Beacon Hill and really complicated, sticky policy issues, sometimes you really need that time to break down and say, all right, here's what we're able to get done. Here's what this means. Here's what we want to go back and do. And so that's also the opportunity we have for the fall.
Right.
Well, that is awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing how this unrolls over the next few months.
And more to be done
as
around
well.
healthcare also.
A lot
Oh,
more. Yep.
oh boy. Well, believe it or not, we are out of time. And I want to thank both Senator Julian Cyr and State Rep Sarah Peake. And this is Teresa Martin from Lower Cape TV. Thank you for joining us for Legislative Update.